Okay, so we are recording. So welcome to Jonny. Jonny, I'm going to let you introduce yourself because there'll be a few people out there that maybe don't know how you factor into the picture of functional fitness. So over to you, my friend.
Sure. Hey guys, first of all, thanks for taking the time to watch this or for you guys being on this. So my name's Jonny. I'm one of the original founders of Functional Fitness. At that time, it was just Functional Fitness Dundee. And then we went on to open Functional Fitness St Andrews. And of course, now we have this absolutely fantastic community. So that's kind of how I fit in. Just now a small cog and quite a decent sized wheel.
Yeah, only hoping to get bigger as well, which,
yeah, for sure.
This downtime's allowed us to actually think about that.
100%. World domination.
Well, yeah. Right, so Jonny, you're coming on to talk to us on the kind of specifics of strength training alone. So obviously strength's like a major part of like the CrossFit program. We do lots and lots of strength work at various stages. So let's look at it from a complete beginner, someone who's maybe even never set foot in a gym or is a cardio king or queen. Why should they be doing some degree of strength training?
She whiz.
Talk about open questions.
Yeah, that's cool because we can go down different avenues on that. So, I mean, it's my firm belief that strength is the foundation of basically everything. I think that if I were to be honest, I would say, although if we look at the CrossFit triangle, so if you guys don't know what that is, it kind of starts with nutrition on the bottom, then it talks about essentially your cardiovascular fitness next, then it's running and throwing, no, it's not, it's gymnastics, then throwing and lifting, and then on top, we've got the competition side. However, I think personally, when you actually take a human being in a gym setting, I think that the ultimate goal of building strength, and that does start from a different path, so I'll come back to that, but building someone's overall strength and capacity is foundational. If we're going to ask people to move dumbbells, lift barbells, potentially hold themselves up on a rig to perform various exercises, then 100% that has to be more or less the foundation of everything we do. Now, when I come back and say that, it does start from somewhere else, what I mean by that is that you have to teach the skill of a movement first, and you have to learn the skill, and this becomes a whole neurological conversation as well. It's not just simply move weight, get muscle, get strong. It's not quite just that simple. And so you've got to essentially learn a movement before you can begin to strengthen the range, if that makes sense. And even from that, we're talking about range of motion now. So now we can go down the route of things like flexibility and ultimately mobility. So there's a whole kind of conversation there. But to kind of make that just a firm bullet point, I would say it just ultimately is the foundation.
Yeah, so you actually have opened up a can of worms. So like if we talk like weightlifting aspect, like and in terms of getting good quality strength work, there is a lot of things to think about, like your mobility and flexibility. So where do they factor in? And like in terms of your overall like program or strength program, like how important are they?
Yeah, huge. So I guess if you were to take a new start person, I think you framed that very well. So if you take someone that's brand new to the gym, what we've got to do is, and the reason that we do our onboarding sessions now in the gym when someone starts is ultimately to get a picture of exactly the way the person moves. If a person has a limitation in any way, shape or form, we're able to pick that up. If someone is moving very well, or if someone has the capability to move well, but doesn't, then ultimately it's about learning movement and correction from there. I think that it depends on the person. I think again, we can go down many rabbit holes here, but I think if an individual comes in, I guess what we're able to do as professionals is look at that person, move, establish what they need, and then things can start becoming quite specific when we're talking about strength training. So, okay, although in a group setting, things are a little bit more generalized, I think having the onboarding sessions certainly helps us deal with more of an individualized aspect. So if someone has, for example, and Graham's going to hate this when I say it, but really poor ankle mobility, that's something that does have to be addressed and can be made a little bit better and improved upon. And then you can help someone move better, again, by relearning the movement and then by building strength on top of that.
Yeah, because I think it's important to mention as well is like for example, no two squats are the same.
Sure.
So the issues that are presented to start with can look very different. In terms of like the flexibility and mobility, so one of the things that or I see or we talk about a lot is like what we look for in a particular movement. So like good mechanics, bad mechanics. So let's take a squat for example. I've got someone that demonstrates good mechanics within a smaller range. Now
Sure.
they can kind of get to points of performance, but at that stage the mechanics deteriorate. How do you deal with that? Like included in the strength program, but then at what point are you looking to get the best of mechanics plus build in like a little bit of strength? Like, does the strength program play a little bit into the improvement of the flexibility and mobility and such like?
Yeah. So yeah, absolutely. So the first 2 weeks, Fraser, that you took had a massive part to do with that in terms of prepping everybody to then embark on this sort of strength program. It's quite funny because the whole program itself is a strength program. It has, like, we built in different phases, and the purpose of this particular strength program is to get everyone ready to go back into the gym and start lifting again. I think we're all very aware, being the type of people that we are. We're I think everyone could probably resonate with this, that as soon as those doors open again, you want a PB, your back squat, your clean, your snatch, whatever you want to do, and everyone's going to rush in those doors and start hitting weight like they've never been away. And one of the things I think we've got to try and remember is that we have been in our homes for the last 9 weeks, I guess, something like that.
Yeah.
And that does not play to athletic movements. It doesn't, and so this particular program was put together with that in mind. So if we're doubling back on things like flexibility and mobility, like I said, Fraser, the 2 weeks that you plugged in that program were absolutely fantastic for that idea on two fronts. One, people had the opportunity to develop if they were quite comfortable with what they were doing. The other side of things, though, is that maybe one or two people would have realized through attempting some of the movement patterns that you put out there that actually they had limitations that they maybe didn't quite realize they had. Now, personally, I would have loved to have thought that at the time at the gym, maybe those things would have been picked up by a coach, and maybe they would have had a word in the ear of the person. And I actually believe that's probably the case in such a large part. However, you don't see everything. So I hope that initial stages gave people the kind of, when you do a program and when you do a particular exercise, you feel things happen and you can feel limitations. You can, if, for example, if you're looking at like how flexible are your ankles kind of thing, and we're doing that initial reach test phase that you plugged in. If you're not getting very far and you're struggling with that, well, damn sure that's going to affect your squat. And then when we're talking about things like building strength, I mean, you're unable to get the full range of motion, which ultimately, we can go into this later on, but ultimately full range movement is going to really help us build the greatest amount of strength. But not only that, if we're talking about CrossFitters, you're going to get no rep, right? So
yeah. So let's look at a few groups of people and how the importance of like strength might impact them. So the three groups I'm thinking of, like, let's look elderly, kids or teens included, and women.
Sure.
So you can do them in any order.
Any order. Yeah.
You choose where you want to go with that.
Yeah. Okay. Let's start with the young then. So, I mean, it's so if I'm coming from my personal belief, I believe that children, kids, teens, in fact, anybody really should be doing some form of strength work. Now, let me just define that real quick, because again, I could say strength work, and I can quite easily just people start thinking, right, bodybuilding, big set, big massive dumbbells and all the rest of it, and I don't necessarily mean that. I do think that everyone should be moving. I think that for the most part, doing something is better than nothing. And I believe that optimally you have science backing things and a really, really sound structure. I think that kids should be, in my belief, again, my son, he's like 9 months old now, so he's going to be picking up a baby barbell as soon as he's able to. Now, what he's not going to be doing is he's not going to be lifting, lots and lots and lots of weight. But what he is going to be doing is learning how to move and building that neurological base of movement. So if I were to, when we talk about strength, I mean, there's two ways to get strong, really. And one is to add more meat on the bones, more muscle. And the other one is to move better than what you were doing previously, or you've learned to move. So if your squat looks like shit, unfortunately, you will be weak by definition, because you cannot get to the full range, or it'll break down, as you spoke about, Fraser, when things start really kicking off. So kids, I believe, should be moving and should be learning how to squat and should be learning how to perform more, I would say, more squat, deadlift, and press. If a parent wants a child to go down the route of maybe playing around with some Olympic lifts and all the rest of it, maybe that's a personal preference, but kids should certainly be doing that. Now, there's the counter argument to kids exercising, or at least the myth that it can stunt growth. And it was funny, because I think it was a paper in about 2005, and this it was more like a question. It was like, does weightlifting in young children stunt growth? And they were referring directly to the growth plates. So for those of you that might not know, as you're growing up, your bones have growth plates, and these growth plates are essentially the nerve center for bone production. And once you are fully grown, they completely solidify, and you no longer have these growth plates. Now, the thought was that if you place load on a child, that you will essentially stunt the growth. And from a certain standpoint, it does stand to reason when you do think about it. However, it's been massively debunked. Now, when we talk about injury and we talk about maybe growth plate injuries, yes, absolutely. A lot of fractures and bone breaks in young children are to do with the growth plates, okay, because they are a lot softer and all that kind of thing, right? But most of the injuries that have been recorded in science in these sort of studies, a lot of them actually had more to do with poor technique and lack of supervision, and lack of good coaching, versus actually placing a load on a child and having them move it. So you can see how some of the data is maybe skewed there, right? So it's my personal belief that it's not my personal belief, it's science, that actually children who do embark on some sort of resistance training, whether it be just basic strength training, again, being careful of the amount of load or the load that you're thinking about using, you end up seeing actually better strength overall, first of all, primarily. Now, the reason for that isn't because they're gaining lots of muscle. That's actually quite hard to do when you're prepubescent. You don't have enough natural testosterone in your system to elicit the response to grow. But what you do have is a neurological response and a bit of efficiency from the brain to the body in movement. So you can see a child gain something like anywhere up to 50% increased strength. And actually, they've not gained much muscle. They've not gained any real muscle. I mean, they've grown, but they've not. They've not gained much muscle. It's simply just because they've learned how to move. And sometimes you'll notice that. I don't know if you've ever seen on things like social media and anything like that, and you've seen some individuals lift crazy amounts, and they don't look like they should be able to do that. And a large part is the quality of their movement and the way they're able to move and how explosive they are in their training background. So without kind of going too far into another tangent, yes, it's absolutely 100% in my belief that children should be weightlifting, and strength work is really, really important. And not only from a physical standpoint, actually, but then there's this whole mental side of things as well, right? How many kids these days are that nervous to take part in PE? how many kids are that nervous to go and play football because they're scared of what Big Fraz thinks? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, and I think that children who actually embark on a sport, it doesn't have to be a strength sport or anything like that. It just could be any sport, any activity. Will gain a lot of confidence from that. And then not only that, but if you're doing something physical, I think from an early age and right the way through, then you're far more likely to continue it. So we're talking about, let's talk about COVID for just 2 seconds, right? So, there are comorbidity factors out there for this. And a lot of it is lifestyle. And a lot of it is because young people in the very, very sort of near past haven't done anything, and they go on to live their life as an adult having not done anything physical. And unfortunately now there are people that are paying the price for that. So I think that, that kids and exercise and specifically strength training is absolutely fantastic. And I think there maybe is too young, but again, it's how you do it.
So it's interesting when you talk about that, Jonny. So like there is very much a as a youngster, use it or lose it. So if you don't start to use it at a young age, like later on, like ultimately you will lose it. So we see loads of people come in the door that have maybe not, like, CrossFit is notoriously good for pulling in people who haven't exercised for long periods of time, and it might be that they've never done anything since they're a kid, and those generally are a lot of people who don't move well and require lots and lots of coaching.
Fraser, can I say I am 100% in that category. Okay, so from a personal standpoint, I was very active as a kid, but never really squatted unless I don't know if I ever remember doing squats or anything like that. And then when I found CrossFit back when I was way back in the day when I was 27, and I was finding that I was having to squat and there were more challenging positions, for example, front rack or overhead squats or stuff like that. Oh, jeez, oh Christ. I mean, my movement was, some might still say still is, a little bit questionable.
No one moves perfectly, Jonny.
No, that's true. But I mean, some more than others, right? But I think that it's 100%. You're so right. You hit that nail on the head. And I just feel like if you are, I don't know, I think people should be moving from a very young age and just continue that right through.
And then, so one other thing before we move on to the elder category. So we're talking about exercising in kids. So one of the things that like CrossFit Kids massively pushes is the use of impact loading. So like impact loading in terms of science is literally jumping and landing. It's almost plyometrics. So in terms of strength development, it's particularly good for like as a youngster developing like bone density, because the impact promotes that neurological response. But see later on in life, like, so as a youngster, if you pick up that impact loading early and you get used to it, then when it comes later on, like, your chance of injury is so much less, because like one of the greatest injury risks that you have is via plyometrics done poorly, which is accelerating and decelerating, and that's where you see lots and lots of injuries. So like I said before, it is very much use it or lose it. I listened to a podcast the other day that was talking about ACL injuries, and ACL injuries most commonly happen at 30-degree flexion, which is like your position. It's like when you land the floor clean. So what that is poor ability to accelerate and decelerate. So those kids that pick up like impact loading and strength training as a youngster, it's going to carry them on like a lot better as they move through whatever sort of like physical career that they choose to embark on.
Oh God, it just makes you more robust. Just simply more robust.
Right. So what about the seniors, shall we call them?
Seniors
that maybe haven't done, that maybe are like kind of 40 plus, that have never done any strength training before. Like, why should they be getting involved in some degree of strength training?
Yeah. So like someone coming at the gym for the first time, and strength is the foundation of pretty much everything we do. I mean, I would suggest that strength is pretty much the foundation for anyone in life. I think there's quite a there's quite a good amount of evidence out there to suggest that, if you continue on into your elderly years with a low degree of strength and not too much muscle mass, then things will be a little bit harder for you. I feel like if you could just get as essentially big and strong as you possibly can throughout your life, then you can then go into your older, your slightly older years, absolutely 100% in much better shape.
Yeah. So when I did the methodology talk, Jonny, I spoke about like the sickness wellness fitness continuum.
Yeah.
And strength work plays a massive part on like a senior, like staying in that or as close to that fitness edge as they can. And what we tend to find in older athletes is like they're in fitness and very quickly they drop. And the ones that drop very quickly are the ones that start to lose their strength and muscle mass quicker.
Yeah.
So that's, and like strength training obviously is a massive integral into the program and into the CrossFit program, and that is the reason is that we want people to stay active and move independently, like for as long as possible. Like there's no like for me, Jonny would probably say the same. There's no expiry date on strength training.
No,
like,
I cringe when anyone dare says to me, "Oh, I'm too old for that." Like I'm like, "Oh, come on! Like you should know better than that." Unfortunately, people don't know better than that. But I suppose like that's why a chat like this is probably quite appropriate, right? So I think certainly for people in their let's say starting, say, I mean, any age, it doesn't matter, but as long the idea is that you continue into those years. I mean, a statistic that I came across the other day was, I think it was based down in England, right? Is that like 30% of people over the age of 65 will have a fall that will lead them to being a serious injury to the point where they're in hospital, right? What the hell? Like you should be squatting and deadlifting and pressing well into your, however, I mean, I'll maybe die under a barbell. Who knows? You know what I mean? Like I will be lifting till probably the day I die. I believe in it that much, right? So
for those of you who don't know Jonny Crowe, that's Jonny Crowe just summed up his entire life in one sentence. I might die under a barbell.
Yeah, I mean, not the strongest dude in the world, but yeah, I do like lifting, right? So it's but I mean but that's a scary statistic, isn't it? And when you actually think about that for a second, like that is for the majority people that have probably never done anything, never really seen the need to, and unfortunately find themselves in a really, really bad way later on. And I can only imagine that those people lying in the hospital bed possibly sit there and say to themselves, how did I get to this? You know what I mean? And that's quite a scary thought. And it's funny, I was having a conversation with Naomi, right, the other day, and we were chatting, and I kind of said to her, I was like, do you think people see themselves get older? Like, as in, like, do you think people kind of see how they get older? I don't know if that makes any sense at all. But like, what I'm saying is a lot of folk, I think, lack the awareness of themselves and where they are at a certain time in their life. And they may go, oh, like I'm limping, I've got this like sore back, whatever. And like, they don't know they can fix that if they just got strong, like, or did something about it. It's crazy. And then, and then it leads into some of these really, really grim statistics. And so I'll give you an example. Sadly, my grandmother, she passed away not long after a fall. It was a fall that got her hip. I mean, I think again, like, see from like that same statistic in England, it was something like in 2014, 2015, there was something like almost 60,000 hip fractures. And again, I think that's entirely down to two things. One is just lack of strength in the body, and also two, the lack of sort of proprioceptive and balance ability caused by that lack of muscle as well. So I think when we're talking about how do you train, or what should you do if you're in a position where you think to yourself, Christ, I am getting on a little bit, and I think I probably should do something about this because I don't want to be in that statistic. And I think the answer to that simply is, well, if anyone's listening to this out with the gym, bloody hell, find yourself a good coach or a trainer.
Yourself your closest CrossFit gym and get involved. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
There's just a couple of things come in, Jonny.
Yep.
Lucy says you need to get that printed on a T-shirt, to which Jim Smith has kindly obliged. He's going to get on a T-shirt for you. Okay, so
deal. Thank you.
Right, last category, Jonny, women. So I know, like, there's obviously like a bit of a stigma, which is hopefully and clearly, and CrossFit's had a major part in that, of should women be doing strength training? Like, women tend to steer towards cardio. Why? What's your belief, and why is it our belief that every woman out there should be doing strength training, just like the men?
Yeah. Well, first thing I'll say is strong is sexy, right? I don't think you can get away from that. That's just, again, personal belief, I guess. But strong is definitely sexy for me, and I think that. But it's not about that. It's not about necessarily that. I think that regardless of what, in my belief, regardless of what your goal is in fitness, I think that strength training should be a massive part of it. I think that if you are looking to lose body fat, and I think there's that conversation where, like, again, we can start talking about like skinny versus lean, and all this kind of stuff. And that's probably been overly spoken about over the years. I would suggest that if you're looking to burn body fat and things like that, then you should be weightlifting. In my you could argue it all day, but the science would prove you otherwise. That strength training is way more effective than doing the cardio stuff. Now, if you enjoy it, you enjoy it. Of course, there's the health factors that come along with making sure that you've got a healthy heart and all the rest of it. But I mean, if we're going to talk about, I think hopefully we'll go on to this in a little while, but it's the benefits of unilateral strength training, i.e. working lefts and rights. You could quite simply do a left-sided Bulgarian split squat, then a right-sided Bulgarian split squat, then something else right and something else left or whatever. Do them all back to back, and all of a sudden your heart rate's up. So what you've got your cardiovascular element in there alongside that strength work. And what you find is that essentially, in a nutshell, your metabolic rate will be higher for longer when you do resistance training. So for a start, that's maybe covering an area where people are like, right, I want to lose weight and stuff. But other than that, apart from there are some obvious physiological differences. Ultimately, there isn't much difference between men and women, and the benefits of strength training for males are also the same benefits of strength training for females. I would say that females are if you're looking into it at all, that are susceptible to osteoporosis a little bit more, and that is 100% a reason to strength train in itself. And what I mean by that is you're slowing down certainly the rate of bone density loss, which could then, I think, lead to those falls. And if you fall and you are less robust, then you're far more likely to cause yourself a mischief.
Yeah, absolutely right. I think the fitness influenzas, as I like to call them, have made that have made that stigma worse, and we're hopefully coming out the other side of that. There's now lots and lots of very powerful women who are fitness influencers out there who provide good content and accurate content.
Fraser, see this? I've just noticed, like, on my screen, like a big vein that runs down here, right? I think that was entirely created because of that whole palaver. I feel that social media and all that utter bullshit has got a lot to answer for, and I think that there's a lot of misinformation out there, and unfortunately, there are certain misinformations that for whatever reason society is held on to, and that vein gets bigger and bigger every time I talk about it.
So talking of social media, this is a small tangent, but it's not normally like me to do something like this either, but it was just something I saw. So a girl I know, she's not a PT, but she's big into fitness, posted something that actually Adam and I mocked in our conversation on nutrition about the benefits of apple cider vinegar. And she listed off a bunch of things, and I had to reply to her and I said, you need to take that down. I was like, the information you're giving here is false.
Yeah.
And right enough, she took it down. But
I've got a question for you though, right? And here's a serious question, right? Do you think she was doing that out of not malice, not because I mean, if you want to drink that shit, like whatever, rock on, but complete misinformation there. And unfortunately, I would suggest that she either heard it from someone else.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was through no fault. It was through no fault of her own.
Yeah.
Which is why I was relatively kind in the process of of telling her that her information was false.
You know
what? Actually, absolute savage, but.
Yeah, I personally though, I when I hear things like that, right, I'm thinking like, man, what a shame. Like, from a perspective of like, I guess she's trying to help people by putting out a message that she thought was correct and thought could help other people, right? But then, unfortunately, maybe there was an element of naivety in that maybe she didn't actually do her own research before putting it out there to the public. I think that was a mistake.
Yeah. Right, we've gone tangent, we're coming back on. Right, okay, so next one. Are there go-to exercises you provide that you would prescribe to people as like the mainstay of a strength program?
Well, yes and no, I guess. So like, I mean, if you're asking me like if I have any go-to exercises that are in the majority of my clients' programming, I would say yes. Love a Turkish get-up. I think there are so many valuable elements to that movement. Planks of varying degrees.
Don't have the same love for a Turkish get-up. Feel the like benefits, yes. Don't have the love for it.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, completely. No, I know what you mean. I mean that there are planks of varying degrees, and then if we come around to it, then unless someone, and this is where I'll come back to in a second, in the idea of specificity. That try saying that 10 times when you're hammered, Christ. That when you look at that element of it, like, I mean, I would have like a squat, a dead, and a press in there for sure. I mean, just as a base thing. But of course, the individual will determine that, right? So if I'm writing a program for someone, first of all, you need to know who you're writing for, and you need to know what the requirements are, right? So you would bring it back to those things, and being specific to the individual is critical. And you would just plug in what you deem to be the best way forward for that person. And the thing with programming as well, right? There's no right or wrong. I mean, there's a wrong. Don't get me wrong. You could literally program horrendously for someone, but ultimately, a lot of it's trial and error. As long as you have obviously a knowledge base of what you're programming for. If you're programming for someone who would like to become generally strong, I love a Bulgarian split squat. That's like exercise 1 in the strength program in week 3 when I took over. I mean, there are my go-tos, but again, it comes down to being specific.
Yeah. So just interestingly said, squat, hinge, press.
Yeah.
As a kind of, like, they would always be a mainstay. So squat, hinge, and press is obviously easy when you're in a gym, and particularly when you've got a barbell.
Yeah, buddy.
How, given the current circumstances, would you best go about substituting them in? So, because really, like, let's be fair, like, this time is a time for us to fix any imbalances and minimize the strength drop off. So, how are we substituting in those movements? Like, what's a like for like replacement? You've kind of covered one with your Bulgarian split squat. Press like a barbell squat, but what about like those hip hinge and pressing and stuff?
Yeah. So, well, let me pull it back a little bit, because I think that the idea of unilateral strength training is so applicable right here. And there's a number of reasons why I would advocate for that in a normal program in a gym, never mind in the situation that we're all in now. And I think that one of the major issues that a lot of us have right now is that we don't all have access to a barbell and weight plates and all the rest of it, where we can just attack our normal strength program, and that's just not the way it works, right? But what we would do is if you were to use, for example, let's just use the example of the Bulgarian split squat. I mean, there are loads of benefits to doing that exercise, including, for example, I mean, quite simply, if you were to do an air squat versus a Bulgarian split squat, unloaded, you have by default more weight going through that one leg, right? So you can already target the muscles, the tendons, all that kind of stuff in a far greater capacity than you ever could doing a bilateral movement. Okay, so that's one of the kind of major elements. I think the other benefits out there, of course, are thinking, like, if you think about it, if you go on one leg or use one arm, you're causing your body to have to then balance itself out and use more core stability in order to keep you in line, right? And to stop you falling over or hurting yourself. So you get this whole element of core work, I mean, midline stabilization, from that you might not get the same level in a bilateral movement like a squat. I mean, I can go through a massive list of benefits, I guess, but I'd probably bore people to death.
So it's interesting. So I have obviously a barbell and weight plates and can continue my strength stuff that's now, but even though I can still spend a considerable amount of time on one leg, because unilateral. And so I get mocked by clients, by people who know what I do, about simply how many lunges I do and give people. It's like my week isn't complete unless I've done 1,000 lunges. Like, it's just mainstay, or 1,000 reps on one leg.
That's cool. That's very cool.
And it's funny. I always, now when people come to me and they're like, "Oh, I want to squat heavier." Okay, lunge more.
Yeah.
I want to run faster. All right, lunge more. Like, I get this pain when I deadlift. Right, do this lunge, and like lunge is just the lunge, and the unilateral work on one leg has become pretty much the mainstay of everything that I do. And then even now more so, it's come, right, because we've got dumbbells, right, it's one arm stuff, it's one arm, and it's one leg stuff, it's obliques, it's one shoulder, like it's become a bigger part of things that I program and things that I do myself as well.
Well, let me give you this, right? So I've Naomi and Jackson and I moved to Cooper, so that's Naomi's mum and dad's house. So they've got this big old house, and there's like now 6 adults, 2 babies, two dogs, right? So a big old party in here.
That's a tough household.
Woo-wee. That's good. It's okay. Saying that because I'm right there. But the one thing that I have now is the routine in the morning for me is I'll get up in the morning with Jackson, let's say around 7. I'll take him up, we'll have breakfast, take him down, bath him, take him out for a walk. So I was on this walk, and where I walk about in Cooper is actually really, right, dead nice, and the weather's been beautiful, so it's been lovely. And on one particular walk, I don't know, I listen to a podcast every walk I go on. Fraser, you'll know that by the amount of links I'll send you and G about, right, guys, listen to this, right? And but I don't know, I was listening to this one podcast and it was talking about habits and all that kind of stuff. And I thought to myself, right, cool. Well, what I'll do is I'll do 100 lunges unbroken, just because, and I was wearing like functional fitness top. So I was like, I'll get a bit of interest, hopefully, with some people walking by and whatever. Anyway, so I did 100 lunges unbroken on this walk. And I got to this next point in the walk and I thought, you know what, I'll just do 100 more because, the cumulative effect is going to be really good and all the rest of it. I did 100 more. I then went back to the park and thought, you know what, I'll do one more set because I can. And I did 100 more. So I did 300 lunges on the walk. Now, I've done that now every single day, bar 2 days, for the last, it must be going on for at least 4 weeks now. So I've done 300 lunges a day, minus 2 days for that many weeks. Now I've upgraded it recently, so now I do 3 bouts of 110. So I'm upping it gradually as I go. Now, interestingly enough, Fraser, you touched on a point where you were saying, well, if you have this pain and, this kind of stuff. And so as you'll know, I've been struggling with a bit of a knee issue for a little while. Really funny. My knee pain has started to dissipate quite significantly. And that's through just, I would suggest, I was unloaded, doing more repetition. It's under control, and I'm doing it regularly. And I'm building condition in probably parts of my body that I never have done. And all of a sudden, my knee pain's just starting to dive off, which is fantastic. I fully anticipate within a month's time it'll be gone entirely. And that's entirely down to that. Now, moving on from that, right? If you think about like someone like yourself, so you are a competitive CrossFitter, right? And one of the major elements in CrossFit is strength, right? So there's probably an event, 1 rep max lift to some degree, whether it be 1 or 3 or 5 RM max lifts or whatever it might be. And by default, then you'll have to work with a barbell quite a lot, just because, again, when I come back to when you're teaching someone how to move, when they first start out, you've got to teach them the skill. Squatting is a skill that you need to work on and hone and develop, much like a clean. So everyone thinks, oh, yeah, the clean and snatches are the technique things. No, like sitting down in the squat well is good technique. You need good technique to do it. There's when you're squatting and you've done it a while, you can feel everything about each individual movement that you make, and like almost like the second rep is the correction on the first, and in the third, if you're doing like a set of 5 or whatever, then the third rep is a correction on the second one, and that fourth rep becomes a correction on it. And if you hit that sweet spot that one of those squats is really good, then you just emulate that movement within a set. And ultimately, by having a barbell on you for quite a considerable amount of time, that has a lot of wear and tear as well. So I'm going to push more for unilateral work in the sense that, well, there's a lot less loading requirement and strain on the support structures of the body as well. So when we're talking about longevity, whether it be for someone who is a competitive athlete like yourself, Fraser, or whether it is someone who is just starting out, or someone who just wants to be really, really fit for a long, long period of their life, the single-legged type stuff and single-arm stuff is so valuable because it does allow you to increase the longevity of what you do. And then, furthermore as well, like we're talking about stabilization of joints and stuff like that as well. Like the stabilization joints, muscles rather, all around the joints of the body that you're using are used in a far better way as well. So there's just so many benefits associated with unilateral work that it would be criminal not to do them in a good strength program alongside, and I have to say this, alongside good barbell work.
So pretty simply on that front as well, as a human, we do a lot of the main way in which we move around. We walk or we run. So guess what?
Yep.
You're on one leg. So it absolutely makes sense. Right, Jonny, let's move on. My next one. There are so many different strength protocols. Wendler, 20 rep program, conjugate, maximal strength training. There's so many, and they obviously, for some people, they all work. How do you wade through them all, and how do you decide what one works best? Go. Open question.
Okay, cool. Well, okay, so progression and overload is king, right? So no matter what we do with our program, it has to be progressive in some sort of way, shape, or form. Now, ultimately, every single program out there, every single method of, whether you depending on what you look for with your sets and reps, whether you're doing German volume training, which traditionally is like your 10 sets of 10, which is and don't be wrong, like that's a crazy effective method of getting strong. Like I don't think there's anyone in the world that's done that properly and not got stronger, right? And quite quickly too. Whereas there are other ways of doing things like just a baseline traditional 5x5, whether you're basing things on percentage or whatever. But ultimately, that kind of progressive overload is going to be critical and king above everything. I almost forgot the question.
So it's maybe worthwhile like talking through a couple of them. So like, let's talk through what's a good one to use? Wendler. Let's talk Wendler. So Wendler obviously 5-3-1. So very much like max strength. So like when and where when and at what stage would you use something like that versus using GVT?
Define GVT for me.
So just high set, high rep.
Oh, German volume training. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. Wow. I've never heard it say that way before. Wow. Cool. Okay.
Mate, you're a CrossFitter. Abbreviations.
Yeah, I should know that, right? I think. Well, so when's an appropriate time to use it? Everyone's different. However, when you are going to do these strength protocols, ultimately, you can do them properly, or you can do them not necessarily as they were written. Now, what we've got to remember here, right, is that all of these well-known strength protocols were written initially by a coach, possibly, for either a particular group or team or individual, right? And they were written with that group or team or individual in mind, initially, probably. And they probably worked well, which is why they then developed into more well-known things, maybe initially within the sporting world, then it creeped out into the strength and conditioning, and then therefore into the CrossFit world. I think that so you've got to be quite careful with this kind of stuff. So, for example, what's the program, the Small Off program? I'll come back to your question in a second, but you look at the Small Off program. That was never designed for anyone in the West that ever does it. It was designed for already very, very well adapted humans, and the volume gets most people, and you end up stopping or being injured. You can't handle it. No one really can. Again, everyone's different, but I would suggest that you could go through that program by accidentally lifting 10% lighter than you really should have as originally written, and you'll get an effect from it, but it's not true to the original writing of the program or the protocol. When's the right time to do stuff? I think honestly that people really need to probably work on their movement with light loads. And I'm being realistic when I say this, and say a good couple of years. And the reason for that is because you need to imagine this, right? First of all, how quickly does a year go? How quickly does a member come up to one of us in the gyms and go, "You've not been here for a year?" And I'll be like, "What? You started last week," and that kind of thing, right? A year goes really, really fast, and within that time, if someone's a member of the gym coming to classes, like, you're not going to get a chance to see them all the time. For example, one of us might have personal training in the other room. That person comes into class and has left, and you've maybe not even had a chance to say hi to them. So you don't necessarily get to see them all the time, and therefore it's like you've got to go through a process when you join the gym of, okay, what does your movement look like? Do we need to develop your squat? Is there a mobility flexibility issue that needs dealt with first? And all of that must be done before you should even embark or think about embarking on a full-blown strength program, right? Because that's the only way that you're going to not get injured. So that could take 6 months, 8 months, depends on the individual who we might be talking about here. It depends how long the individual takes to actually go ahead and say, right, okay, I'll put my ego aside and actually work on my movement versus how much weight can I move, right? So that might last 2 years before the person's moving optimally. And it may have been short, it may have been shorter, it may have been longer than it needed to have been. But then you can embark on a protocol. 5x5, in my view, is probably the safest bet to begin with. If you're starting to go down the route of like 3s, 2s, 1s, by default, you really need to go to those high percentages. And those percentages are tied with risk. I think any lifting in the gym is risk, has a certain amount of risk to it. But again, with our coaches and these guys, our guys are all fantastic that hopefully they're going to catch things before they happen, really. I think that doing like a German volume training thing's, again, something that you should probably look towards after you've had a good couple of years of good solid movement. And I think the amount of strength work that exists within our CrossFit programs, I think, is more than enough for those first 2 years. I would always advocate for one-to-one, because you can really get eyes on and you can really fix things and change things where in a class you might be missed. But But I think an individual would need a good amount of time to get ready to embark on a serious strength protocol, like, for example, your 3-2-1s or your 10 sets of 10.
So interestingly, you've actually struck a nerve on one, and it is Smolov. So I hate Smolov, and the reason I hate Smolov is because I've seen people in our gyms do Smolov. Now, people in our gym is like, oh, like I'm not strong in a squat. Like I need to get strong in a squat, and like that's cool. Like I understand you want to get a stronger squat for sure, but like this is, and these people will know who they are, and I don't feel bad about saying this, but these people are people who want to be competitive CrossFitters. So they jump onto Smolov, which, if you don't know, you squat 3 times a week, and it's like high volume, high percentage, and it like you take a beating. So they follow Smolov for this like long period of time, but then they wonder why they've gotten so bad at everything else. It's like they've allocated 3 sessions a week. So like when I say sessions, like if you're doing that volume and that percentage, your strength session isn't consistent of much more than that. So you've allocated like 3 sessions out of your, if they're training twice a day, 10 sessions just to squatting.
Yeah.
And like, what are you doing? Like, just do less and play the longer game. Like, strength absolutely is a long game. Like, I always make that comparison. Like, it could get you fit in about 6 to 8 weeks, but it'll take me 2 to 3 years to get you strong.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, mate, I mean, I'll say to some of my clients, I'll be like, we measure skill development in weeks. We measure fitness, aerobic capacity fitness in months, and we measure strength in years.
Yeah,
that's the way I put it to people. And by the way, that whole skill technical thing carries right through, and of course your metabolic condition carries right through. The thing, I think the thing that people don't necessarily always understand is like how strength actually works, or like what effect a proper strength training protocol actually does to your system, right? So, and I'm going to follow on from your point, Fraser, because to a large degree, I actually 100% agree with you. So for those of you that maybe don't know, when you lift at a huge percentage, there is a massive toll on your central nervous system. And there's other things too. So there's things like your mechanical tension. There's an element of metabolic stress, and a result from those things combined, there's also muscular damage. So you've got those things to contend with, right? As well. But with your central nervous system, you have it gets tired. And the only way that you know it's tired, like you won't yawn anymore. You won't be like, ooh, like I'm tired. Like that's not how that really works necessarily. It's when you go to lift the next day and you are just not on it, or you don't feel the same. And it's this neurological tiredness. Now, the problem with CrossFit is that a lot of competitive CrossFit events, a lot of them end up being quite short, sharp, and a lot of the time you're going to be lifting heavy a good few times if you're competing over the course of a day or whatever. Now, not to say that you'd be doing small on the run-up to competition. That would be ridiculous. But you need to train at a certain output and level to achieve the ability to have the output and level on the field. And if you're doing something like Smolov, again, to continue Fraser's point, that you're beating your central nervous system down to a point where, and 3 times per week at a high percentage is a lot. If you're then going in and trying to do CrossFit workouts and CrossFit training, you're so beat up on the inside that you won't realize why your performances and your abilities will dip off. So 100%, I'd agree with you, Fraser. And I think if you're going to do something like a small variation, you need to have those percentages really low. That's the only way to get around it, in my view.
So I am,
and not even that.
So where to kind of just to demonstrate like how so I have like a group of competitors that I program for. So I program for them a program. Essentially, it's a year cycle. So we go open to open. So there's about 7 or 8 phases across the year in which we program in. So the first one is like high volume, low percentage, isometric. So they'll have lots and lots of pauses in various positions, and that's to fix anything. They also have lots and lots of unilateral work, because that in that early phase of their season, that's where we fix any issues that we've got. Like, it's a case of stripping back before we go and build on it. And then from there, they'll move into, as Jonny spoke about, like the classic 5x5, mainly because in that you get like a fairly good amount of volume. But as the weeks, we can play around with it, so we can have good volume, we can have less volume, higher weight, and then we can go for some maximal. But generally, we'll always cycle like 5s, 3s, and 1s, and we'll do that for a couple of phases. And then they'll go back into another phase where they'll do maximals. So the first set of maximals will get lots and lots of opportunities, so that they're lifting maximally, but they're doing it frequently. But that phase of training lasts fairly short, because there's lots and lots of stress there. They'll then come off of that and they'll go into another phase where they'll still lift maximally, but they'll do it way less often. So they should go into like that session each day feeling that a little bit better. So that's when we're looking at, if you're going to PB, that's your time to do it. Before, because we're CrossFitters by nature, we go back to adding that in with metabolic stress. Because let's be frank, as CrossFitters, and use the open as a example, you have to have a baseline of conditioning to get to the heavy barbells. Like, never has an open workout ever started with a heavy lift or a heavy barbell. The heavy barbells, you've had to earn your way there by being fit enough, which is why I'll sit back and I'll look at people doing small of and being like, you're an idiot, because yeah, you can be as strong as you want, but hey, if you're not fit enough to get there, what does it matter? Likewise, the group that did the weightlifting 101, raw strength and power, you can do all of those lifts as good as you want, but hey, if you sacrifice all degree of fitness, like, to get there, like, what's the point? Like, strength is a huge like component of it, but it's no more important than like you're being good at your gymnastics or being good at conditioning. Like, the likeliness is, and this is talking sport, the sport of CrossFit more as a specific, but conditioning will always take precedent. Like that's why it's at the bottom of the pyramid in a CrossFit triangle front. Like, you have to earn your way there. Yeah, you have to do it for sure. But yeah, like, in terms of a test of CrossFit, like, you have to earn the right to get there.
Absolutely. I think also, like, if you were talking about a year's kind of plan for someone that wanted to do well in the open or do better than what they did before or whatever, I think you would certainly come off of the back end of a season, so to speak, and then you would look to address any major strength issues. I think that's a good foundation. But Fraser, you probably know yourself, like, you'll have to build a large degree of fitness probably on the run up to an open or an event as well. So maybe there's a right and a wrong time to go about these protocols. Possibly it depends on the season, right? It depends on the specifics. But if you're doing a weightlifting program and you're really close to something like the open that you want to compete in, man, you've messed that up real bad.
So like, you're absolutely right. There has to be a time. There's a time for all of these things, and it's just, and really, that, I suppose that's, we're talking being back to that's goal based, like, depending on what your goals are, and where you see yourself hitting those goals. so like there has to be a bit of there's a really important conversation there to be had. It's like, right, what's your goal? What's your timeline? Like, I want to be really, really strong, but I want to do it in 6 weeks. It's like, nah, it's not like that's not going to happen. Like,
No.
There's a longer process here.
Yeah, I mean, again, if someone did say to me though, Johnny, right, I want to get strong. Like, let's say we're talking about an Olympic lift, right, or even just a squat. I mean, I say just the squat. Again, there's almost as much technique in that than there is almost anything else, right? And if someone said to me, right, I want to get stronger and I've only got 6 weeks, well, I wouldn't program a single strength session. They would be going on a full-blown 6-week movement analysis and correction. That's the only way. You know, like, again, I think I mentioned earlier, like, there's only a couple of ways to really get stronger. One, ultimately, is to put more meat on the bone, and two is to move better than what you were doing before. But yeah, you couldn't gain strength in 6 weeks. That's not possible.
Yeah,
I mean,
your gains in that would be so minimal.
Yeah, no, I mean, your adaptation wouldn't kick in for at least a few weeks, and then you get, I don't know. Yeah.
Right, Johnny, we're kind of dived into this a little bit. So, like, being strong as a CrossFit athlete. So, looking at CrossFit as a sport now. What is strong? Cover this again. How long realistically does it take to get strong? And where does the importance of being strong in CrossFit lie? We've kind of gone here already.
Yeah. So I've got this. Let me just pull something up real quick. I was thinking about this before. Now I got hold of a document a little while ago. I don't have it here. And it was actually by CrossFit Thames that produced it. Reebok CrossFit Thames. And what they did was, and I'm not entirely sure how they came about with this, but it's a very, very good way of thinking about it, I think. Is that what they've done is they essentially categorized various strengths. So if I said, for example, their beginner category consisted of you being able to back squat. Now, I'm talking about competitive CrossFit, by the way. So let me just absolutely separate the idea of day-to-day fitness in the gym and loving the idea of doing CrossFit and separating it completely from the whole competitive thing. So we're talking more in this competitive range, right? So they would say that their beginner athlete would be able to back squat, I think it was 1 times their body weight. And then they would categorize an intermediate competitor being able to back squat something like 1.5 times their body weight. I've maybe not exactly these numbers, by the way, but I'm just giving you guys an example. And then they would consider an elite competitor to be able to back squat 2 times their body weight. But what they did was they did that for every single exercise. They did it for a good few benchmark workouts in terms of time. They did it for things like how quickly can you row 1,000 meters type thing. There was loads of stuff in there. And then so what you were able to do was you were able to look at this graph and essentially go, okay, I am elite in the deadlift, perhaps. I'm an intermediate in my back squat, or certainly intermediate in my front squat. But crap, I'm a beginner at my 1,000 meter row time. Jeez, oh, right. So what makes a strong CrossFitter, I think, is being able to move all of the pegs up. Not always at the right time, because it'll take a lot of time to get them up there to where maybe they need to be, but maybe being able to put your ego aside and go, well, okay, I'm really good at fitness. I'm really good at running a mile. I can run a mile real fast. But I'm not strong in my front squat. So a good CrossFitter, a good competitive CrossFitter would be someone that maybe is aware enough that they know where their weaknesses lie, and then being able to pull the pegs up where required. Maybe your deadlift's fine, so you don't really need to do a lot of specific deadlift work, because ultimately you're going to be Olympic lifting quite a lot anyway. That'll probably cater towards that and maintaining that. But then then you'll have to nudge up the pegs in the other areas. So does that answer the question?
Sort of. Yeah. So this obviously the standard of or the numbers of strength athletes have gone up drastically. I don't know if anyone's ever watched the Fittest on Earth documentary from 2015, 2015, was it the year they went back to the ranch?
Yes.
And they repeated the deadlift ladder.
Yes.
And the numbers that people were hitting on the deadlift ladder were obscene. And like it was a vast improvement. And that was just as people spent time. And it was the same on the snatch ladder. The snatch ladder regionals versus the max snatch. So one of the first years of the games, they had a max snatch, and the heaviest lift for the females was something like 145 pounds, which is 67 kilos.
Yeah, that's light right now. Yeah.
And then in regionals in 2014, I think it was, the snatch ladder started there, and they had 12 reps of it.
That's right. Yeah.
So like strength, like in the sport, has skyrocketed in time. So in my own experience, like, and it's mad how that's changed. So it really depends where you go as to the requirement for strength. So if you go to something local, like for example, if I was to go to something local, local being Mid-England North, is local in the CrossFit world, I can expect to place high on a strength event. I'd be disappointed if I wasn't walking away with a top 10 finish based on my numbers. Got a 120 kilo snatch and 135 kilo clean and jerk. So, but for example, when I went to the European Champs last January, the first event was a max snatch. At that stage, I had a 115 snatch, but on the day I hit 110, finished 29th.
Yeah.
Like, so I was like in the middle of the pack. Like it wasn't actually anything special.
Yeah.
And actually, in terms of my I think in terms of all my finishes, it was my like third best event. But normally those strength events are a thing that are a banker for me. But like once you're up, like in that kind of like, for me, that medium level, like obviously that's a major strength for me, and that's what pushes me like towards tops of leaderboards. Yeah. But once you're in with the big boys, like the big boys are big boys. Like if you're not snatching, like, so for me hitting a 120 snatch was a huge deal. Because that made me competitive, like at that level. Like once you're snatching 120 plus, like you're up there in terms of snatching. But on like a clean and jerk level, if you're not clean and jerking 155 plus, you're not there. Like you're not at the races on the male side. And I'm a long way away. Like I'm a long way away from that. I get away with it on a snatch because like we spoke about, I move well. But a clean, like there's a bit of a clean requires strength, which I don't currently have. There's a PB in there somewhere. It's not come out yet, but it's coming. But then interestingly, like the other things we don't get tested on, or I have never been tested on. Like I've never had a squat tested in a comp. I've never had a press and I certainly never had a deadlift tested in a competition. And it's not like, these are things that I've never even heard of being tested until you're at the regionals games level.
Yeah, it's because they're not sexy enough.
Yeah,
like, that's the fact. That's the fact of the matter. It's a shame because I think CrossFit has absolutely no issues with programming something that might not necessarily be great for the viewer. They'll be fine with just programming. Like, I mean, if you ask yourself honestly, right, who really wants to watch a max overhead press?
Yeah,
I really don't. I would skip that part, right? I think that, I mean, personally, I like the idea of squatting dead because it kind of ties into, not that I do powerlifting, but I quite like watching that stuff too. So I think that I don't know. I think yeah, it's just not set. Like for a smaller type event where, again, the idea is you really have to drum up the people to make the money back on the event, because remember, you paid out all the money for the venue and the vendors and all the rest of it or whatever. Like you're going to have to put something on that people want to see, and unfortunately, a lot of the time it's going to be an Olympic lift variation. So it's a shame you don't see the kind of standard lifts as much.
Yeah, so I think the only people that I've certainly heard of testing a max deadlift was the year before we went to Strength and Depth as the big team. So Strength and Depth Origins, as it's called now.
Yeah.
And we went in 2018 was the first we went, but in 2017, their first event was a max deadlift.
Wow.
And that's the first time I'd ever heard that. But one of the other things that obviously contributes to that is kit. So,
how many weight plates do you need?
Yeah, but that event is sponsored by Alico. So,
oh wow.
The other thing as well is like you think about bumper plates, and once you're up to 200 kilos plus, like you're struggling to get more weight plates on the bar. So by Alico being the sponsor, they could get proper cast iron plates that are thin. Yeah. So so yeah, that's the only time I've ever heard of anything.
To be fair, you make a fair point about space on a barbell, because the majority of competitions these days, you're using kit from other gyms, or you've got the bumper plates, and those big thick things, they weigh only 20 kilos.
Yeah.
If you look at a competitive plates can be real thin but weigh 20 kilos.
Yeah. So I think it's scary to think how strong people are going to get.
I do think that we're going to be. Things are still getting better. There'll have to be a point where people will start hitting the ceiling. Now that's when the whole the idea of performance enhancing drugs maybe comes into the equation to somewhere along the line. But I think that it's amazing to see what people can do now, and it's amazing to think what might be possible in the future. I remember there was a video done by CrossFit a good few years ago, and they were talking about something like people being able to pull 500 pounds and run a sub 6 minute mile, a 5 minute mile, whatever it was, and people are doing both of those things now quite easily. Not easily, but they're doing them.
That's a challenge that loads of people are doing just now.
Is that right?
Because they're in lockdown. So for those that have a squat rack, but don't really have a huge amount of space, so I've seen lots and lots of people on Instagram that are good CrossFitters attempting that now. Adam Klink is one of them that trains at CrossFit Krypton. He's posted, he's like, I'm training for the 500-pound back squat and sub 5 minute mile in a day.
Well, right, okay, there you go. Yeah, and that's cool, because the reason that's so cool is because they're just on complete different ends of the fitness spectrum, I suppose, if you want to say it. So it's proving that people don't have to be specialists, because again, for those who might not know, like obviously with CrossFit it's very, very broad, and what you tend to find if you've been doing CrossFit for any length of time, you'll realize that if your back squat starts to increase quite significantly, you know damn well your gymnastics have fallen off somewhere, because you'll tend to maybe just not put the time into both, or be able to build it in a manner that works.
Constantly juggling. So before we do the quick fire round at the end, Jim Smith has just come in and he said max deadlift at next Team Wars. So funnily enough, Jim, I have tried to program a max deadlift before, but I actually wasn't, when I say I was going to program a max deadlift, I actually was going to program a deadlift ladder once, like the games, but for the reason that we discussed, I couldn't do it because I couldn't get, at the stage, I couldn't have enough weight plates, and I didn't think I could have enough weight plates to make the bars heavy enough. Because actually in our gym, we have lots of people that are really strong. So like Fraser Allen will pull a 250 kilo deadlift.
That's wild.
Which are like balancing weight plates on top of weight plates to make it happen. but then like even to go on top of that, like we've actually got like a good like we've got the 200 kilo deadlift club, of which in St Andrews, like now in particular, I don't know how it stacks up in Dundee, but we have lots of people in that 200 kilo deadlift club. So Chris
cool.
Ruxton's pulled a 200 kilo deadlift, Chippy's pulled a 200 kilo deadlift, Angus Lahore's pulled a 200 kilo deadlift.
Mm-hmm.
So like, so you, like if you were programming that, you would have to consider that, because people in our gym have moved to that point that they are silly strong. And that, like, I mean, that's the same on the girls' side. Like, you're having to contend with girls pulling 140, 150 kilo deadlifts, which, like, when we first opened in 2016, could you ever have imagined that?
No way. I mean,
like talking about people in double figures pulling, like on the male side, 200 kilo plus, and on the ladies' side, ladies pulling 140 kilo plus.
Mate, back in 2013 when we opened the Dundee gym, like this wasn't even a consideration, man. I was still trying to squat below parallel. So
still trying.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
Just kidding.
Get there
just
sometimes.
Kidding. Right, so Jonny, I finished every week with like a quick fire round. You knew it was coming, but you just didn't know what was coming.
I'm ready.
You've got 5 questions. There'll either be a yes or a no style, so you'll have 2 options,
okay.
Or you'll have essentially 2 sentences to answer. Okay, so number 1, you've got one last song before the asteroid hits the Earth. Is it country music or heavy metal?
Oh, damn it. Right now, country.
Okay, what is the song?
Oh. It's song number 2 or 3 on one of Luke Combs' albums. Damn it, I can't remember the name.
Okay. You can come back to me
I'll search
on that
one.
one. Yeah. Luke Combs. Number 2, your favourite Man City player of all time?
Pablo Zabaleta.
Oh, controversial. That's not what I thought you were going to say.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to go Yaya. I thought you were going to go Yaya Toure.
No. Do you want me to explain it?
Yeah, go on then.
All right. So, sorry for those of you not into football. I'm sorry. So he played in the position that I did when I was younger, right? So I kind of have like a thing for that position. But not only that, he was one of the money, and therefore what that told me was that he put his body and his heart on the line for the club. He believed that's kind of that in today's day and age that doesn't happen. So
nice, interesting. Right, number 3. What's Jackson's future athletic career?
Well, at the look of him, competitive eating.
Nice.
But I think a strength. I think something strengthy. I think he's. Yeah, I mean it's hard to tell right now, but I'm pretty sure he's going to have a decent build for it. So yeah.
Here's an interesting one. I've listened to a couple of people talk about this on actually the same podcast. What's your thoughts on kids doing competitive CrossFit? Are you of the belief that sport should come first, like a sport, a team sport, or an individual sport, or before they choose CrossFit?
So that's a lot. I could go long-winded on this. I believe that being in a team is a great thing. I believe that you should not get a medal for taking part. I believe in winning and losing. I think you develop more when you lose sometimes, and I think that you earn the win. You don't just get handed something for being there. And I think the social element of a team sport is good, and I like the idea of a team sport that does require strength. So that there's kind of that element of getting in the weight room with other guys, other girls, whatever it might be. Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, I mean, absolutely. Yeah. So in terms of competitive CrossFit, though, for kids, I think that going from a sport to CrossFit can be better. I have experienced in the past a young CrossFitter who I could say it was easy to burn out with very, very few other sports. You're never put into a situation or an event space quite like a CrossFit event space at such a young age. I've seen, so I'll use an example, you won't mind me saying, so a few years ago I was coaching Robbie and we went to an event, it was in a massive skate park. Huge, I mean, it wasn't a huge event, but it looked huge. It looked amazing. The way it was laid out was insane. And I think, and also like strength and depth as well. Fraser, what's the one down south in?
So you went to Robbie went to Battle of the Beasts, which is now European champs.
That's right. Yeah. So those events, and I think depending on the individual, I think that can be quite a lot to take here. Things like expectation, things like just there being a crowd, and I mean, if you were a competitive, almost like a competitive anything else, would you really be in that kind of environment, like a massive crowd and all that thing? So my thing is like team sport definitely, in my view, something strengthy, because that's the bias of mine, and I think that definitely going from a team sport or another sport into CrossFit is quite good.
Nice. Okay. Number 4. What's your dream car?
Right now, my dream car would be a Ford F-150 Raptor.
Nice. Interesting. Why?
Just big.
Just because you want it?
Yeah. You know what it is, right? I really want that. I love the idea of like being able just to chuck loads of stuff in the back and just go somewhere and just hang out in the field and just, I don't know, weird, I know. I've got this thing.
Fair. Right, last one, Jonny. What's the worst workout you've ever done?
That's easy for me. Calcio.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Calcio is like my favorite workout.
Well, let me tell you why, right? So there was this one time, way back when, where I did it next to Craig Hume. So if you don't know Craig Hume, Craig's quite a fit dude, right? And he was done, and I was on like rep 40.
Yeah, and Craig's exceptionally fit.
And you just go into a deep dark hole. So again, if you're not sure about that workout, it's a 100 thruster for time, and every minute, is it every minute on the minute?
Yeah.
Yeah, 5 burpees.
5 burpees.
Right? Like, I mean, man, if you start to struggle, you're in a hole, because that timer doesn't stop for you.
That's such a good workout. You programmed the F50 throwdown 1 year. I did so like the last time I did that workout, I did it in class at FFSA, and I did it alongside Kirsty. Kirsty is fit, so I finished off, and I was like, "This is amazing! Like that was so cool. The most fun I'd ever had." Kirsty was crying, like actual tears leaving her face. I was like the 2 different spectrums of the feeling of that workout. Like I love calcio.
So I would be also crying too. Yeah.
The last thing I want to say before I wrap this up, Jonny once went through a phase. Let's say maybe 18 months ago this was going on. Nah, it had to be longer ago. It must have been about 2 years ago. But we used to have a little squad that would meet up on a Tuesday afternoon at 2:00, and basically for about 6 weeks straight, Jonny did the same workout, and the reason being he wasn't quitting doing it until he finished it. So I got wind of it, and I said, right, I'm going to go over. So this workout, to Jonny's defense, it was horrific. It was like 20 down to 1. So it was 20, 19, 18, 17, all the way down to 1 of calories and burpees. But every 3 minutes, you had to do 3 power cleans.
Yeah, 3 power cleans. Yeah.
Um, so it got pretty close, but we kept it at 40 minutes. So
Yeah.
6 weeks in a row, Jonny tried, and 6 weeks in a row, Jonny failed. The poor guy. But it started off. It started off on the positive. Like he was getting better. He was getting
I was.
closer.
I was getting closer.
And at 4 weeks, no, he was getting worse again. It just wasn't happening for him. Poor guy.
Man, that was that fatigue, of the central nervous system I was talking about.
Yeah. So
it wasn't.
when we go back,
You know what it was?
gym,
Fraser, let me explain what it was. Right, it was there's only so much of a beatdown a man can take. Right, so what would happen is that someone would catch wind of this workout and go, "I'm going to help Jonny through this one," right? And they would up, and they would finish the workout.
That was me.
And then someone else would do the same thing, and they'd be like, "Oh, you know what? I'll just be there for Jonny. I'm going to help him through it. I heard he's been at this a few weeks," and they finished it. And it just and this happened for like 7 weeks, and yeah. So I think now that you've brought it up, I'm going to bring it back. So see when we're back in the gym, I'm going to give it a go.
That's going to be it. That's what we're going to be doing on a Tuesday afternoon. We're going to get Jonny to the shape of finishing that workout.
Oh man, I need to give it a name. Does it have a name? I don't even know if it's got a name or not.
I don't know. I don't even know where you came up. I don't know where you got it or where you came up with it.
I got it from the depths of hell, apparently.
Yeah. It wasn't particularly enjoyable. Yeah.
No. Well, it's fine if you finish it.
Well, I mean, even finishing it, like it's not a particularly enjoyable experience.
No, not so much. No.
So the day I came over, and Craig was doing it, and Craig and I are both as competitive as each other, and we raced the whole way, and it was a constant balls effort for 32 minutes, and I was nearly sick, and I don't often feel like that, but I was on the verge of sickness.
You know what it is? Because, and to be specific to you guys, the workout is done on an assault bike, so it's not like you get to pick something nice. It's an assault bike, so there's this we kind of worked out roughly to get it through it quite quickly, and really the goal is to get through those larger numbers quite quick, right? Because as soon as you're through those larger numbers, it is a lot easier to take mentally and to break down, right? And you're at those sort of 20s, 19s, 18s, and you look at the clock and there's 15, 20 minutes gone by the time you're at the end of the 17th or something, and you're like, what? But crazy. You're actually about halfway once you're through that. So
yeah. Right, Jonny. Thanks very much for your time. It's always nice talking to you. Yeah, and thanks for coming on. Thanks for everyone else who's come and joined.
Thanks, guys.
We'll make this available for y'all to watch. I'm just going to stop recording.